Thanks everyone for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I'm really glad to have Shari Rodriguez here. Shari is a candidate for the position of Assistant Unit Leader Wildlife in the Washington Cooperative Fish and Wildlife Research Unit and faculty member in the School of Environmental and Forest Sciences at University of Washington. I'm Sarah Converse, and I am the unit leader of the Washington Cooperative Fish and Wildlife Research Unit and an associate professor in the School of Environmental and Forest Sciences and the School of Aquatic and Fishery Sciences here at UW. And I would like to begin by recognizing that the University of Washington acknowledges the Coast Salish peoples of this land, the land which touches the shared waters of all tribes and bands within the Suquamish, Tulalip, and Muckleshoot nations. And as I said, I'm really pleased to be able to introduce Shari Rodriguez today. Shari is an assistant professor of human dimensions of wildlife at Clemson University. Her research focuses on understanding the drivers of human behavior and the role humans play in wildlife and natural resource sustainability. Her research program largely focuses on recreational hunting and angling behavior, human-wildlife interactions, and issues of diversity within the fields of wildlife and natural resources. Shari received a bachelor's degree from Whitman College, a master's degree from the School for International Training, and a doctorate from North Carolina State University. And today she's going to be talking to us about understanding recreational hunting and angling, human-wildlife interactions, and diversity through the lens of human dimensions. And I'll just remind everyone, you probably know the drill, but we'll take Q&A at the end. We'll take questions at the end for Shari. And there's a little Q&A icon down at the bottom of your Zoom screen. So you can use that to enter questions at any point during the talk, and we will come to them at the end. And with that, I would like to welcome Shari.
Thank you so much, Sarah. I appreciate it. I'm going to start my timer because I want to make sure I stay on track here. Yeah, so thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really excited to be considered for this position. It's really an honor so far, as it being kind of a dream job. So yeah, I did add the piece at the bottom of my title, A Vision for Washington, because it is going to be a fairly big chunk of my presentation. So first I want to start with an overview, and I want to talk about my current research, the research that's currently being done in my lab. So as Sarah had said, I largely focus on recreational hunting and angling behavior, human-wildlife interactions, but in the process of preparing for this presentation, I really didn't realize how much of my program is JEDI focused, so justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so, it definitely has changed the way I think about it, because I've always sort of thought about it as sort of a group of side projects, but they're really not. They're really pretty central to my program. And then the last part of my talk, I really want to talk about the transition to the unit and to the department. And so I'm going to go from there. As I said, I have, three main themes, and I've had the benefit at Clemson and in my career in general of being a generalist, meaning that I've had sort of the go at whatever it is I want to study. South Carolina does not have a human dimensions staff member at the agency, at the wildlife agency. And while there are others like me at Clemson, I'm really sort of set apart from the rest of my department and the rest of my community, which has been wonderful for me to be able to pick and choose what I'm interested in. And so, this is what I've landed on, and I'm really happy with these three themes. They're very exciting to me, and I really enjoy them. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in and start with recreational hunting and angling. And what I'm going to do here is I want to talk first about one particular study that I've done in a little bit more detail And then I'm going to hit on a couple other studies within this theme of recreational hunting and angling. So this first study is a project that my graduate student Laurel Downs is doing. She's a master's student. She's getting ready to graduate. And the sort of origins of this project are that South Carolina Department of Natural Resources, Wildlife and Freshwater Fishery Division came to me and said, you know, we need to know more about our turkey hunters. We don't know a lot about them. And we'd really like to know, are they satisfied with the hunt? And so this project really has been about meeting an agency need. What they wanted specifically to understand is, you know, overall get an overall understanding of their turkey hunters, but also look more specifically at two different hunting regimes. So they're lottery hunters for the 2018-19 years hunt seasons, and then their web-centered WMA wildlife management area for the 2019 season, hunt season, excuse me. And so this is sort of what I set out to do. To address this issue, I used a mail survey to access these hunters. So the DNR gave me the full list, a total population of hunters within these two regimes. And I used a modified Dillman method to access these hunters. And so a modified Dillman method is a pre-letter, a survey, a postcard, and a survey. So they get 3 opportunities to respond to the survey. So you hope to leverage those 3 opportunities to a high response rate. And we did do non-response sampling, but instead of traditional non-response, we did a wave analysis, which is a method where you look at the first wave of responders and the last wave, and you compare them as if they are responders and non-responders. And we did okay. We got a response rate of nearly 50%, which is, I think, pretty darn good. And a little bit higher for the lottery group and a little bit lower for the web group. What we're looking at here as far as objectives really were to, again, look at the overall as well as differences between the regimes, and specifically looking at satisfaction with regards to the quality of the hunt, the success of the hunt, and the overall satisfaction, as well as their perceptions of turkey numbers. And then as well looking at their hunting practices, and those hunting practices are allowing us to create a typology of turkey hunters, which is going to be, I think, immensely helpful to DNR. And then of course we collected sociodemographics. I really want to focus on these 3 parts, and so, you know, that's again, I'm not presenting, and this is a really big study, but I want to present with some really key pieces of information with regards to the results. So here are some key differences in the 2 populations, the lottery hunters versus the WMA hunters. So if we look at the lottery side first, these are hunters that largely hunt in the upstate of South Carolina. They hunt private lands more than public. They typically hunt alone. And they tend to, you know, more so than the web group, serve as mentors towards novice hunters. And they perceive more so than the other group that the turkey populations are in decline, and they have higher levels of education. The web group is, quite different. They primarily hunt the low country. They hunt public lands more than private lands. And they sort of generally have a higher level of satisfaction with hunting. They're more successful, they're more satisfied with hunts, they're more positive about hunt opportunities, and generally more positive about hunt quality on private lands, not public lands. Giving you a little bit of information more into the satisfaction aspect, and here we've got a couple of graphs, one looking at private lands, so the quality of private land turkey hunting as compared to, the quality of private lands as compared to 5 years ago, and the quality of public lands as compared to 5 years ago. And these are perceptions, right? So there are always going to be perceptions when you ask this question, but the trends are pretty similar, that most feel that the quality of the land is either holding steady or getting worse over that 5-year period. This is similar comparison where we're looking at turkey numbers, perceptions of turkey numbers on private versus public lands as compared to 5 years ago. And what we see here is that, over half of the hunters in both cases perceive a decrease in the number of turkeys on both private and public lands as compared to 5 years ago. This is speaking to the number of turkeys harvested overall on WMA, sorry, I squished that word, that acronym together, WMAs in 2019. And very clear that, we have the vast majority of hunters who are walking away from a season, the 2019 season, not having harvested a turkey. What I find is really interesting is that, we have perceived low quality, we have perceived, declining turkey population, we have perceived, number of turkeys harvested, the number of turkeys harvested was overwhelmingly 0 for that season. And yet what we see here is the overall satisfaction with the 2019 hunting season, turkey hunting season. And we see that nearly half of our respondents indicated some level of satisfaction, whether we're talking about, a low level satisfaction or a high level of satisfaction, it's satisfaction. And then about 31% are indicating they're dissatisfied. As I indicated, we have, we've got this information from some of the data that we're using with regards to their hunting practices, and we're using this information to create typologies of hunters. This is, something that is done fairly commonly in the hunting literature. And, this is really early. I just want to emphasize these are really early results as far as these typologies, but what it looks like is we have 3 typologies. We have the people who are social hunters, those that are nature hunters, and those are harvest focused hunters. And so, what would we say to DNR, once we're nearly finished with this whole study? So, at this point, what do we say to DNR as far as them managing their hunters? Well, if you want to satisfy the social hunter, you need to give them more opportunities and locations to meet up with their social hunting community. That is likely to lead to satisfaction. For the nature type hunters, you want to give them, locations that are steeped in nature and make them feel like they're out in nature in order for them to feel satisfied. And then, of course, there's the harvest based or harvest focused hunters, turkey hunters. And to satisfy them, you need to give them more opportunities to hunt the birds. So not rocket science, but it is, I think it's very informative, and I think it's giving DNR a better idea of what their turkey hunting population looks like. Again, for sake of time, I'm going to kind of keep these sort of brief and give you a flavor of the things that we do in my lab. And I want to talk about this study because it's one of my longer running studies. This is a study focusing on providing R3 opportunities for college students. So this is also an agency need project. I am not the originator of this project, so I'm going to give credit where credit's due. My colleague Lincoln Larson, who is at NC State, was originally at Clemson and started this project with DNR law enforcement. And when he left Clemson, he turned over this project to me, given that I was the person who did the most similar work that he did. He does hunting work as well. And I've had it now for 3 years. It's 5 years total that we've have data, 5 years of data that we have. And I just want to describe what this project's about. I'm sure there's some people in the audience who are involved with this project because it's actually part of a much bigger project. But the South Carolina portion of this project is such that my graduate student, Teddy Fisher, who's a master's student, has been working on this for a few years or a couple of years. And essentially what happens is we recruit students at Clemson. So we're looking specifically at Clemson students. And we advertise with email or with flyers, and they respond to an email. We put them on a list, we collect information. We send that information to DNR and work with DNR to select students. And that selection there's a limited number of spots in these clinics. So these are clinics for them to learn how to deer hunt, essentially, and limited spots in the clinic. And we select largely based on whether or not they have experience hunting. So we really want novice hunters. And we also want people who, or DNR wants people who are going to stay within South Carolina, right? The idea is to increase recruitment and retention, hopefully, in South Carolina. So we try to select people who are from South Carolina or who are going to stay in South Carolina for quite some time. On the day of the clinic, immediately we do a pre-survey that assesses their motivations, their barriers, their attitudes towards hunting, their knowledge, and their confidence about hunting. They then go through the clinic, and the clinic is made up of 4 stations where they learn about marksmanship, safety and gear, rules and regulations, and then we do a cooking and meat preparations, or I should say a DNR does this. It's all their conservation law enforcement officers who run these clinics, and they're amazing. And so they teach the students, these 4 aspects of deer hunting. After the clinic is over, we do a post survey to be able to assess the differences between the pre and post. And we offer them an opportunity for an optional hunt. They're not required to go on an optional hunt, but it is an option. We want, of course, this is recruitment and retention. So we want to give them an opportunity in a mentored condition where they can learn or they can experience the hunt. So we also follow up these students after a 1-year period to see if they are still hunting or they're still interested in hunting or intend to hunt. And just recently I have expanded this to go beyond the single year, although it becomes harder and harder as students leave the college setting. We may or may not have the ability to stay in contact with them. We try. But generally we see about half the number of participants in the clinic. We see about half of them responding to the 1-year follow-up. So just briefly, the key findings in this study are that, college students are not motivated really by harvest at all, by trophy, they are motivated by harvest, I take that back, but they're not motivated by trophy hunting. They're really motivated by the natural aspect, the nature aspect, so their contribution to conservation, and this, new adventures and having fun. The clinics themselves actually did result in an improved attitude towards hunters and hunting. So the great thing is they get to interact with these law enforcement officers, and these guys, they're really amazing, and guys and gals, I should say. They're really amazing and really positive about hunting, very informative, very knowledgeable. So these students get exposed to actual hunters as well as DNR officers, which appears to change, contribute to changing their attitudes. Their barriers decrease. Some some barriers increase, but for the most part, they decrease. So they really get a real sort of real world perspective of what hunting's about after this clinic. And so it does change their barriers, mostly for the positive, decreasing them, but also can increase some. And then, of course, their knowledge and confidence in hunting increases significantly. As I indicated, this R3 project, this deer hunting clinic project, is part of a larger multi-state program or project that, again, is led by Dr. Lincoln Larson at NC State. And as you can see here, there's 22 states involved in this project. South Carolina, it's Clemson and DNR law enforcement. We make up the South Carolina arm of this study. And we have our first publication is, I think, in revision right now. I think I don't remember now if it's revision or review. I apologize. But coming out hopefully soon, and also a second publication should be coming out very soon as well. This last project is, again, from my graduate student, Laurel Downs. She's a master's student, and this is her brainchild. I hired Laurel to do my turkey project, and didn't have a second project, didn't have necessarily a second chapter. I could make a second chapter, but I wanted to give her the opportunity to do a project that was really within her passion. She's a herpetofauna nut, and I say that with the most affection because she's a really great student. But she expressed an interest in herpetofauna, something related to the human dimensions of salamanders and amphibians and reptiles. And so I directed her to the South Carolina SWAP, the State Wildlife Action Plan, and she came up with this, hey, I'm really interested in doing something related to this spring lizard issue. And so spring lizards is a colloquial term that's used in the Southeast as well as parts of the West Coast. Spring lizards are salamanders. And there's an old practice in the South where people go and catch them, and there's a variety of methods of catching them, but they use them as fishing bait. And so she really wanted to understand if this is a practice that's still in place. And so we use two modes to understand, to access information regarding this topic. And so the first, we used a mail survey. I should sort of correct that. We used a postcard with a link to an online survey. So it was really more of a mixed mode methodology for implementation. But we got a random sample of upstate anglers in 18 upstate counties in South Carolina from DNR and sent out this postcard to them. We also, she also did bait shop visits, so physical bait shop visits of 34 bait shops in the same 18 counties. Unfortunately, we haven't had a great amount of response for this. The pandemic sort of hit at a time where it just sort of messed up with our research timeline. That, in combination with the fact that this is a topic that we're dealing with, potentially illegal activity. South Carolina is at the edge of a biodiversity hotspot for amphibians. And so we have a lot of amphibians, and a lot of them are endangered. And so, we don't know for sure if people are answering in the way that, honestly, or if there's a social desirability aspect coming into play here. But nonetheless, based on what we do know, what we did collect, we know that there may not be much of a practice anymore. Stores rarely carry spring lizards, but yet there may be still a demand. Moving on to my human-wildlife conflicts, I want to talk first about a study I did a few years back on perceptions of feral hog damage in South Carolina. This was born out of a management need from the South Carolina Farm Bureau, South Carolina DNR, and then in conjunction with the South Carolina Wild Hog Task Force, of which I am part of. I assessed Farm Bureau members, so farmer members, using, again, that modified Dillman method. And I really wanted to assess attitudes, perceptions of hogs, experience with hogs, how the respondents manage hogs, and then how they, the extent and the perceived cost of damage. So pretty good response rate at 30%. And I just want to give you, again, a flavor of the types of questions I asked. I asked a lot of Likert scale questions. In this particular set really speaks to attitudes and perceptions of hogs. Hogs are detrimental, they're a threat to human safety, they're a nuisance, they're a source of disease, they need to be eliminated at all costs. And you can see mean score, they're all above the neutral of 5. I used a 9-point Likert here. So all of them are looking at strongly agree, or at least agree that they are nuisance and whatnot. We were able to assess hotspots for feral hogs. So we asked respondents to talk about all of their properties if they owned multiples. So we had 145 properties represented within the 735 sample. And what's interesting is only 32% indicated, or 32% of those properties had sustained hog damage in the previous 12 months. And you could see the hotspots here that we noted based on numbers indicating they had damage. And these do correlate to the hotspots that DNR themselves note through hog harvest. I wanted to assess sort of extent of damage and the perceived cost of damage for crop items. And here you can see, I don't know if you can see my cursor, but corn was the highest cost as far as perception of the value of that damage. And then as far as the mean score on a 9-point Likert, we see just over the neutral of some damage to other, which is the wheat, hay, and pasture. And then non-crops, likewise, I wanted to assess non-crops, so food plots, vegetation, water, and then time. I know that's not really a crop or even a non-crop, but I wanted to assess their impact on time of repair mostly. And you can see that food plots is just over the neutral with some damage, and with regards to cost, about almost equal as far as wildlife food plots, and time being the most impacted. I also asked them how much money do they spend on hog control, and the majority indicated, almost 70% indicated they don't spend any money on hog control. And this was of the people who indicated they had hog damage, 70% indicated they did not spend any money on hog control. So key findings here really are that attitudes are largely negative for feral hogs. No surprise, right? It's considered a pest, and there's a federal mandate to eradicate them, so not a surprise there. But attitudes are negative despite the majority of respondents not experiencing any damage. And what's interesting is, again, they're saying their attitudes are negative, but yet those who are experiencing damage are not spending any money on that management. So it really speaks to the idea that for the agency, what they, if the goal is to do something about the damage, then they need to put more tools in the individual landowner's toolbox as far as dealing with these hogs, because there may be several different reasons as to why they're not actually spending money on hog control. It might be cost prohibitive. It might be physically difficult for them. There's, a large majority are over 60 years old, some into the 80s and 90s in our response, our participant group. I want to move on to, boy, time goes really quickly. I want to go on to this new area of research that I'm working on, and it's really dealing with the indirect impacts of human-wildlife conflict. So let me give a little bit of background. Direct impacts, they are immediate and physical, observable, they're easily quantified, they're readily known, we've published about them for decades. They include property damage, injury, death of livestock, and sometimes even to people, depending on the species that we're talking about. The indirect impacts, on the other hand, are these impacts that are downstream from that direct impact. They're far less tangible, far less studied, and they include things like fear of attack, post-traumatic stress, disruption of livelihoods or disruption of household dynamics, loss of opportunity cost, impact to psychological and social well-being. And so this is an area, like I said, there's not a lot of research on this, and it was born from a need from my former postdoc, Dr. Christy Sampson, who was doing a PhD project at the time through Smithsonian, and all of her Asian elephants in Myanmar were getting poached. They were all dying, and she had no more data to collect because all of her collared animals had been killed. And so she came to me asking if we could put together a study to assess the social aspects of elephant conservation in Myanmar. I've since implemented a similar framework in India for tigers with a former grad student. And I just want to, again, briefly talk about the elephant project. This is, to our knowledge, the first quantitative analysis of the indirect impacts of human-wildlife conflict. We interviewed 380 rural people in Myanmar using a stratified random sampling method, using local research team. And what we found was interesting. I guess it's not unexpected to me anymore, but direct impacts are very common, but surprisingly indirect impacts were just as common. So we asked about a host of them, and they were just as common as the direct impacts. But despite there being, really steady direct and indirect impacts, conservation attitudes for elephants were pretty positive overall. Next project really is looking into this idea of jaguar conservation. It's again born from an interest from my graduate student, Angelica Solano, who's a master's student. And we're really wanting to understand awareness, knowledge, and attitudes about jaguars and jaguars in Colombia, South America. She's Colombian, so this makes sense. And we're also using a consumer theory to sort of not only assess actual consumerism around jaguars, their jaguar related products, like coffee and things. And then also using that same theory to sort of investigate this idea of buying into conservation. So we're partnering with a zoo in Colombia, and this is a in progress project. The last part of my project, or last theme of my project, like I said, is really Jedi related, Jedi focused. And like I said, I'm really excited about this. When I sat down to really think about how many Jedi related projects I had, I was a little bit surprised, because of course I know what they are. I just never stopped to really count them or think about them in those ways. So I want to just talk about really briefly completed and in progress projects. So I have 3 projects that have been published or are in revision currently. So the first one I published a few years back, gender differences in hunter recruitment and retention in Denmark. This was a data set that sort of fell in my lap as a PhD student. And we weren't really anticipating there being a gender focus, but it turned out that was the most interesting result of the analyses we looked at. The second bullet is a project I embarked on with our forest operations faculty member in my department, who does a lot of work with non-industrial private foresters. And we originally started off looking at the impact of a 2015 drought and a 2016 hurricane on non-industrial private foresters in South Carolina. We realized quickly that we had a lot of information, and we basically spun that first paper out into a second paper that really gives a deeper dive into the demographics of this particular group of foresters. And we have been able to focus to a large extent on gender as well, because female foresters is an up and coming demographic, but yet there hasn't been a lot of focus on it thus far. And the last one is the brainchild of the Wildlife Ecology Lab at Clemson. They asked for my participation in the study, looking at undergraduate access to field internships. And so a lot of different interesting results coming out of that. It's in revision, coming out hopefully this year. And then again, briefly, in progress or in preparation projects. I consider my R3 project a Jedi project. It's looking at a demographic that hasn't traditionally been thought of in hunting. And so very much to me, part of Jedi. I'm also working with Dr. Renee Valdez, who is the Virginia DWR Human Dimensions staff member. And we are looking together at diversity in law enforcement at the Virginia agency. And we're looking at it from 3 different aspects, from the hiring staff, the current officers, and the potential recruits. And so that's in preparation. Hopefully it'll be submitted within the month. I have a graduate student who is Indian, and she is looking at a justice, what I think very much is a justice project. So she's looking at human relocation of local people from tiger protected areas in India for the purposes of increasing tiger conservation capacity in these parks. So she'll be going back to India to do her research hopefully soon, and very much a justice, it's really a Jedi project. I think whether it's, climate refugees or people being moved out of tiger protected areas, it's really about, environmental justice. Oh, sorry. And then the last project is a project that is ongoing, that is something I developed several years ago with some undergraduates, and I conduct it with as part of what's called a CI, and I'm going to go to my next slide because this is essentially the project. The project is an assessment of the benefits and challenges that female professionals in natural resources face. It's a qualitative study, so I wanted to talk about it because it's a departure from all the quantitative research that I've talked about already. It's informant directed, meaning, if you know anything about qualitative research, it's, whatever the participant, whatever direction they go, that's the direction of the interview. And the women who are participating in this project are, and will in the future participate, are really a wide variety of experience, of age, of type of employment. So academics, agency people, NGOs, we're interested in all of it. We've interviewed 20 women so far, transcribed and analyzed the data, which again, if you know anything about qualitative research, is very different than quantitative. And so this is an ongoing project. I anticipate continuing with this project if I am the chosen candidate, or even if I stay at Clemson. I will continue this project. We are nowhere near saturation, and it's been very eye-opening so far, very interesting and eye-opening. And the last part I want to spend these last few minutes on is my transition, what my vision of transitioning to the unit and to the department would be. So I first want to talk about the composition of my lab. I anticipate, I'm an assistant professor now. I've been doing this for quite a few years, and I was a lecturer prior to being a tenure track professor, and so I've built my lab over a 5, almost 6 year period, and what I have envisioned my lab being, if I'm the selected candidate, is very similar to what I have now because it works. 1 to 2 postdocs, 1 to 2 PhD students, and 3 to 4 masters. Currently, I don't have a postdoc. I had Dr. Sampson was with me for a little over a year. I have 1 PhD student, and I actually have 4 master students right now, with a 5th one being who would start in the fall, who may or may not follow. I don't know. What projects would we work on? Well, the mission of the Cooperative Research Unit is paramount here. So, cooperator needs are priority here. And frankly, I'm thrilled with that because the amount of things, opportunities for research in Washington are incredible. So it's the mission, it's the priority. I would largely, want the program to be cooperator driven. I want to be able to contribute by informing management decisions. But that is, I don't want to leave it there and say, hey, that's it. I want to say, there's no shortage. Based on the time that I've had to look at the cooperators as well as the department, I don't see any shortage of opportunities to integrate. I see faculty members in the department doing research at different scales, so environment, natural resource, wildlife specific. And I've just listed a couple of areas here, a lot of emphasis on predator-prey relationships. I see some, obvious potential for, some urban ecology, which I've done a little bit of in the past. Invasions, I find very interesting. It's very exciting to think about the faculty at both institutions and all the cooperators and all the opportunities that there could be to do research. I'm also very encouraged by the fact that there are, I think, 4 other socially focused faculty members in the department. And that's important because, having a community of social scientists is not something I've really had thus far, and it would be something that I'd be very interested in. I'd anticipate possibly, and Jerry, you're going to have a view on this. I wasn't able to find everything I wanted to in looking for R3 efforts in Washington, but I did note that there is an R3 coordinator. But I see, ample potential opportunity for increasing R3 programming in the state, given that what I'm reading, there's been an 11% drop in hunting license holders between 2008 and 2018. Youth hunting participation is down 22% in the same period. There's opportunities for recruitment retention. Likewise, the Chalk Talk that's coming up, highlights, one specific game species that is likely, I'm very interested, first of all, in mountain lion research, but it's game, so it's hunting, recreational hunting, but it's also human wildlife conflict. So it's a nice opportunity to combine the two themes. And again, this list could go on and on. This is, many, many opportunities for human wildlife interactions, including wolves, which I know, the history, it's been a topic that DFW has been working on for quite some time. Still lots to do because it's a dynamic issue, not a static one. Again, mountain lions, I've seen a lot of evidence or information about, sea lions and their predation on fisheries, likewise cormorants, whales, boat strikes, tourism being an issue. And then of course, I've seen a bit about urban wildlife and the conflicts that occur within the urban sector. So again, not an exhaustive list by any means, but so exciting and so encouraging that there's so many things to choose from. And then of course, I do anticipate continuing with my Jedi research. I don't see necessarily any of the three main themes in my lab. I don't see them as mutually exclusive. I see them, you can have, the hunting and the human wildlife conflict or interactions being, covering one project and as well, Jedi can also be part of that as well. So I anticipate continuing and persisting with this theme. And from what I can tell about the unit and the department, that would be something that would be encouraged and supported. I'm going to stop there because I think I am out of time or nearly out of time, and I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you very much. That's great. Thank you.
Do you want me to stop sharing?
Yeah, sure. That probably would work okay. Yeah. Okay. So obviously one of the things about not being in person is that you can't hear us all applauding.
Yeah.
So
thank you. Thank you
very much. Well, we've got already a bunch of great questions. Okay. All right. So the first question is from Chris Smith, and he's asking, are there different proportions of the 3 turkey hunter typologies within those 2 broad categories of hunters that you had identified? If so, what are the implications for management to satisfy the 2 different broad categories of hunters?
Yeah, so Chris, so first, that's really an early view on the typologies aspect. So I don't know proportions, right? When you do typology work, you're trying to categorize a person that has characteristics that could be, varied levels of characteristics of all 3, but you're trying to put them in one group for the purposes of sort of understanding how to manage for turkeys. And so, yeah, I mean, I don't know, I can't answer your question just yet with regards to the differences between the lottery and the web hunters. I don't have an answer for you because we're still in the process of doing that typology. But as far as implications for management to satisfy the 2 categories, yeah, your overall approach for lottery versus web may be different depending on the composition of your 3 typologies, so like the proportion of your 3 typologies. So it really depends on sort of what those final results will be as far as what we would recommend to DNR and how they move forward with managing for turkey hunters.
Great, thank you. And then Chris actually has another great question here. Several important issues in Washington would involve listed species. So like the spring lizards study, I love spring lizards. How would you address the reticence of people to provide responses to typical human dimensions, sort of data gathering methods in these circumstances? So people are sensitive about where listed species are.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so this idea of, we're essentially talking about poaching, right? Any illegal activity like this. And so there is research talking about detection probability. with regards to illegal activities. And so, we looked at doing detection probability for this project and felt that, it wasn't necessarily going to be the right choice for this project. So I haven't done that research yet using that sort of methodology, but that is one way to get around this idea that you have this social desirability issue and this desire not to get caught doing an illegal act. You don't want to, what they don't know is that what's unfortunate is that, I'm bound by the Institutional Review Board to not give up. They tell me something, it is confidential. I can't give them up as a poacher. That's, IRB is my bread and butter. If I don't have IRB approval, I've got nothing as a researcher. So what's unfortunate is, I can say it as many times as possible in my information that goes out to them, like, no matter what you say, I can't share it, I can't share it. But you're still going to have some social desirability going on where people are not going to want to tell you, they're not going to want to fess up to that illegal activity, no matter how many times you reassure them. So again, there are methods out there for addressing this to try and find out better information. Some of it is almost like using citizen science. And in addition to that detection probability, is using citizen science, like, you doing a project where you're having people ask their hunting cohorts for information, for inside information. They're the inside actor. They're already part of that hunting community. And so it makes sense that they would be able to ask some of the questions, bound again by IRB. There's ways around IRB and designing a study where you're working within the realm of IRB approval. But, getting that, like I said, almost citizen science sort of methodology to allow for that inside view of that illegal activity topic.
Right, interesting. Thank you. Oh, I was just going to say, put more questions in the chat, but they're coming in pretty heavy now, so we're in good shape. Adu Prakash has a question about hog control. What are the current solutions for, particularly for small landowners for hog control?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, and sorry, just not enough time to go over those sorts of things. I asked a lot of questions about that in that questionnaire, in that study. Yeah, so sort of the cream of the crop for hog control is whole sounder removal. So the sounder is the social group of the hogs, and there's a lot of research out of Mississippi State that shows that if you remove a full sounder, you actually can get somewhere with controlling your hog populations. That's not terribly, it's achievable, but it's difficult because hogs are really smart. They're very, very smart animals. And so the main method for, your small landowner is, I think that what you asked, yep, small landowner, is that, they might have a corral trap where you set up a corral. You might have, there's different types of doors and with the different types of triggers. There's now what's called the Jaguar Pro system, which is a camera system and a sort of internet trigger, basically. So you have a detection, the animals go into your corral trap. You get an alert on your iPhone that says, hey, you've got animals. Then you can look at your camera and you can look at it and say, oh, I know my sounder from my camera trap is 15 big. I have 15 individuals. I only have 4 individuals, so I'm not going to trigger my door. I'm not going to release my door. So there's so many more options now for effective hog control as far on the small scale. And so, I think they get better and better. The problem is, there's now products on the market for using poison, which we're going to have a giant issue with bycatch. And so there's a product called Kaput that has been on the market. It tried to go on the market, saw not a lot of acceptance. It's totally illegal in South Carolina. I'm pretty sure it's illegal in most places. But I'm sure people can still get a hold of it. And so there's sort of these new dimensions of the challenge of controlling hogs with regards to bycatch. So it's a very complex issue. But essentially, to answer your specific question, it is trapping, and it might be shooting. All right, there was that whole Twitter thing that happened a couple of years ago with the guy who was like, yeah, just use an AK-47 and shoot them all down. Well, you know, it's not going to be your most effective method. So trapping is going to be likely your most effective method.
Great, thank you. This next question, this is great. This is a really cool question. And it goes to your discussion about diversity and conservation law enforcement. Mm-hmm. So Chris Smith asks, a recent national survey of conservation law enforcement officers indicated that the community places a relatively low priority on diversifying the workforce. How would you propose to follow up on that finding to identify potential resistance to diversifying the ranks and our strategies to address that resistance?
Can I ask a clarifying question on that? Because I'm actually not familiar with this report. I'm sure it's, I'll say we've probably cited it, but I'm not pulling it up in my memory banks right now. And so my clarifying question is, are you saying the conservation law enforcement community or the broader society is saying that they don't place value on diversity?
Chris, I'm going to turn on your mic and allow you to clarify that. Should be able to talk.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, yes. This is a very recent survey, Shari. It was just completed a few weeks ago.
Oh, great.
It has not been published. It was a survey done by the National Association of Conservation, or for the National Conservation Law Enforcement Association by Responsive Management. And one of the findings in there was that they place a relatively low priority on diversifying their ranks.
So you're saying the conservation officers themselves place low priority? Yes. Yeah. So what do I say about that? So you want to know, sorry, I'm missing where that, how would you propose a follow-up on that finding? Yeah, so I think the follow-up is, let me try and delicately answer this because it's a complex problem, or a complex topic, and it's also very sensitive. And so I think that the public who does look for diversity within their public representatives, I think their views are equally, if not more important than the community of law enforcement officers themselves, right? We want people working in public service to represent our public. And if they don't, then we have issues of, inclusion taking, or lack of inclusion taking place. And so while that might be the case, that the officers themselves don't feel the need for it, I think in this case, my professional view is that the public value of diversity is going to be more important, given that the public is who those conservation officers serve.
Okay, great. Thank you. Very interesting topic.
Yeah, thank you for the question. That's a good one.
Okay, Mark Sherrill is asking, notes really interesting portfolio of projects. I'm wondering if you could tell us a bit more about the kinds of quantitative methods that you use in your research.
Sure. Yeah. So, my most of what we do is, regression based. We're trying to predict behavior. And so it really is, it's largely based on regressions. I mean, it's pretty basic, simple analyses, but, occasionally we do get into principal component analyses, factor analyses, cluster analyses. I'm not your quantitative biologist. I mean, if you're looking for a quantitative biologist, I'm not your girl. I'm really, my strengths are, I feel, I'll pat myself on the back here for a second. I feel like I'm really good at designing studies, human dimension studies. I'm very good at designing surveys. I can do the statistics that I need, but when it comes to something newer, fancier, I'm going to always have a social statistician, involved in the project, because I want to make sure that I'm doing what is most appropriate for that project. So to answer your question, Mark, yeah, I mean, I try and keep it pretty basic. especially when I'm working with, which I do mostly work with master students. I try and keep the stats to really tangible, understandable analyses, and then we go from there with the help of a statistician.
Great, thank you. I think we're going to run out of time, so I'm just looking at these questions and trying to kind of hit a diversity of question types.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to go to Brianna Abrams. She said, thank you for sharing your work. What theory or theories have informed your research, and what theory or theories has your research informed?
Yeah, so I don't use a ton of theoretical frameworks in my work. I'm using a few. So I've used protection motivation theory with regards to human-wildlife conflict. I'm using a consumer theory right now. I mean, I'm a big believer in theory of planned behavior, theory of reasoned action is the basis for pretty much every behavioral theory out there. And so, but I was just thinking about this the other day. What I don't like about theories when it comes to applied research is that they can cage you into a very limited scope of the consideration of variables that are important in a project. And so I prefer to allow, literature and sort of experience and sort of the analysis itself to sort of inform what analysis we do, rather than sort of limiting those variables that are considered to a theoretical framework. I think they're really helpful for guiding how we think about the projects that we work on, but I don't always use them for the analysis themselves.
Okay, great, thank you. There's a few more questions, but I'm afraid we are out of time. So I think these are folks that you're gonna get a chance to talk to again. So I think we'll leave it there. Thank you again for joining us. This was great to hear about your work. And many of us will be getting a chance to talk to you more. And I just want to thank everyone who was able to join us today. And thanks again to you, Shari. And we'll sign off and we'll see you soon.
All right. Thanks a lot. I'll see you soon, Sarah.